Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Reuse Company webinars. My name is Cecilia, and I will be hosting today's webinar. With me, I have Borja Lopez, lead developer at the Reuse Company. You will be muted during the webinar, but if you have any questions or comments, you can use the chat box. But please address your comments to the Reuse Company and not to the presenter. If you have any technical issues, please use the chat box or send an email to support@reusecompany.com. The webinar will be recorded, and in a few days, we will send you the link to the recording. This is the agenda for the webinar. First, we will have a short presentation of the Reuse Company and the presenter. Then we will see the impact of poor quality requirements. We will get some tips about how to improve the quality. After that, there is a demonstration, and finally, we will have some time for questions. Okay, let's start with a few words about the Reuse Company. The Reuse Company was created in 1999 as a spin-off from a university in Madrid, by system and software engineers. Our headquarters is in Madrid, but we also have offices in London and in Stockholm. Our mission is to provide a knowledge-centric approach to leverage systems engineering activities to our customers. Since the company is a spin-off from the Carlos III University of Madrid, research and innovation is in our DNA, and about 10% of our revenues are dedicated to research and development. The Reuse Company is also actively involved in several large European research projects like Arrowhead or New Control. The Reuse Company is also called TRC. We like to say that it's easy to remember if you think of T like in traceability, R like in reuse, and C or Q like in quality. Who is using our technology? Here you can see some companies that are users of our system. They come from quite different industries like aerospace and defense, energy, automation, and healthcare. Now let me introduce the presenter. Borja is responsible for the innovation development at the Reuse Company. That is for next year's commercial releases. He has experience in systems engineering in the aerospace, defense, railway, and automotive industries. He is leading technical solutions that help improve requirements verification automation. And his topics of interest include knowledge management, information retrieval, requirements engineering, software engineering, and domain architectures. So let's start with the webinar. Getting started with the requirements quality assessment.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, for your introduction, and thank you all of us for joining today's webinar. So today's session deals with getting started the fundamentals of the requirements quality assessment process that we have implemented in our tools that have been in the market for some years. So I have split this session in two sections, I would say. First of all, we'll go through some slides to review and to go a bit into the fundamentals that we have implemented into the tools, as I said before. And then for the second part, I will show you the tools directly. So we will see a bit how to solve a couple of use cases using the requirements quality analyzer and the requirements authoring tool, which are two of the main tools that are part of our tool suite that I will also show you as an overview. So first of all, why do we need to tackle with requirements quality? When we are talking about systems engineering, especially in all the domains that involve safety critical building safety critical systems, we all want to avoid situations like we have here in this extreme picture, right? When it comes to human lives, we don't want to suffer things like we historically we have historically seen especially in aerospace, in automotive, in railway domains, like for instance in this case of the NASA in 1999, misunderstanding between the different measurement systems that we have. For instance, confusion between the British Imperial System and the international one, so that the software was not working properly. Not only in aerospace, but also we had in railways some problems such as very basic building trains bigger than what the platforms allowed. More examples that we had, not only regarding human lives, but also the impact in the society. For instance, broadcasting live events such as this landing of the artifact that finally crashed. Some other examples, as I said, in the safety critical systems. I will go through them. So basically, a lot of them were reported as just simply software issues. So the software was not working properly, so it finally didn't work. But studies have reported finally that it was not just the programmer not doing their job, but also was problems with requirements statement, miscommunication between teams, and so on. So it has a huge impact not only in human lives, which is the most important thing, of course, but also in companies themselves in terms of budget, money, rework, time, effort, and society in general. So for sure, we need to fix this and try to minimize as much as possible. We need to improve the communication between teams. We need to detect failures earlier in order to make the system improve. And for sure, the final goal is to minimize this kind of problems. So in this picture coming from the INCOSE Systems Engineering Handbook, we see that in the different stages that are involved in the development life cycle, detecting a defect in a production phase, for instance, is up to 1,000 times more expensive to fix the issue instead of detecting problems in the conceptualization or design phase, especially taking into account that almost the 85%, according to the figures, of the budget is already compromised before starting the development life cycle. So this saves not only, as I said, the lives in general at the end of the day, but also it improves the processes and helps company to achieve successful projects in order to fail. So we can see another study in the red line. Nearly 70% of the defects are introduced in very early stages. In this case, it shows the requirements phase. But if we see the green line, from those 70% of defects introduced, only the 4% of ones are properly identified in that phase. So we can see that more than the 50% of those defects are identified during the test phase. So it involves that the systems are already built. So we saw in the drawing before that the cost to fix that defects can be up to 1,000 more expensive than detecting the failures in the requirements phase. So the final goal is to, for sure, try to close the gap as much as possible between the red and the green line, between the defects that are introduced and identifying them in order to tackle in early stages. So basically, let's go through some tips or some rule of thumbs to try to improve the quality of requirement specifications in particular. I would say to improve the quality of all the processes involved during the typical V model for life cycles, by starting for the requirements, which are the first phases. So we might wonder first, if we want to get to a final goal, how we do that. Why we propose to focus on textual requirements? Because most of the initial phase is not only the initial, but until the development, and even after this with test cases and validation of the systems and so on, everything is about requirements, basically. We also have models, we also have another kind of artifacts. But requirements are the core of getting a system in a life cycle getting a final system from initial needs. So we need to care a lot about the communication, which is the basics. It is the most simple thing we could say. For instance, having a sentence like, I need to put a pie in the oven at 120 degrees. So we can all of us agree in that the statement is really clear. But when it comes to engineering environments, the same statement can lead to many different understandings depending on who reads a sentence. So we might get to situations like this. This is not for sure. This is an extreme picture, but it might happen that we have these problems in requirement specifications. So we have known different standards developed with the pass of the time, and these standards define a lot of properties or characteristics that must be found or compliant or fulfilled in my specification if I want to improve the quality of the requirements, for instance. So we can say that the requirements must be this kind of smart. They must be specific. They must be measurable, attainable, relevant, and for sure they must fit in time. And within requirements documents, we might have, for instance, ambiguous requirements or things that are not understandable. So the final goal is basically to apply all these characteristics so that we can have, or we should have, very clear statements of what a system needs to do, and then we'll see how to do it. So if we want to, for sure, improve the quality, in particular about of requirement specifications, first of all, we need to measure to identify what is not properly specified. So TRC proposes in the tools the CCC approach, which is basically the core of our technology, the 3 C's. The first one, which is correctness, is the let's say in brackets, the most simple one. It deals with individual requirements, so that we can identify how correct or incorrect, how well is written single requirement, every single requirement, for instance, in terms of misspelling or ambiguity or vagueness. We'll see some more metrics after these slides. But then we also have the 2 other C's, which are very relevant and a bit more complicated, and they do not deal with individual requirements, but sets of requirements. We need to check a requirements document is consistent itself and with the other documents that we have, or if my specification is complete, or I have, for instance, missing states of a machine state that we didn't specify properly. So all these rules that we have implemented in the out-of-the-box ontology that we'll show later, they are all coming from the INCOSE guide for writing requirements. It contains a lot of good practices and rules and quality rules to follow. So we have automated this on our tools so that they can be automatically executed against requirements document, and they can for sure be tailored and modified depending on the needs and the project and so on. So let's go with these 12 points as a rule of thumb of requirements quality. So first of all, the first one, we need to keep our requirements short and precise. This is really important because people tend to express several needs in the same requirement, and this is not good, because maybe this requirement should be split into 4 or 5 different requirements. We need to take care about the comments, the rationale or assumptions that we usually type in the requirements. For sure, they are important, but maybe this information is better to store in other sites, such as attributes, if we are using doors or other systems that support this kind of attributes, and not in the requirement itself, the requirement statement itself. We need to be consistent with the imperatives, with the actions that we use. We need to agree which tenses we should use and use them consistently. Because it's not the same using shall or using should. Indeed, the INCOSI guide recommend using shall and not using, for instance, should, which could lead to, okay, this is mandatory or not. And if we need, or if we think about using different of these ones to express priority, it is also better to express the priority other ways, for instance, using attributes to prioritize requirements, not putting them into the semantics of the requirements. Atomicity, for sure, we need to express one only action per requirement, and this is very important. Let me check. This is very important because the intention of the requirements authors should be keeping the requirements easier to understand, and for sure, it means at the end of the day easy to verify. We usually as well tend to express and the system should do this and this or this. So this can lead to a lot of misunderstanding between different teams, because what is very clear for one person might not be so clear for other ones. So let's try to keep the requirements for sure easy to understand. Atomic requirements. The passive voice is one of the classical rules. They can lead to problems, but passive voices themselves, they are not harmful. Here we should put the focus on when we are using passive voices. If we are using them in preconditions, talking about the subjects, they might not be so harmful, but we need to take care if we use passive voices in the main statement of a requirement. So it will not be so clear what the system should achieve in which conditions. So we'll see an example of passive voice detection, detecting these, identifying the different parts of the requirement so that we can put a red flag when using passive voices in the requirement body, but not in the precondition. Number 5, negative requirements. Negative requirements. When we are using negative keywords, they can be really helpful to state some complex conditions, but they can also be very tricky for non-native speakers, because the meaning or the semantics of the requirement might not be clear if we are using this kind of negative stuff. Vocabularies, for sure, when we are defining or specifying what the braking system of the new car should do, it is very important to use. We are in a concrete domain, that's for sure. And it's not the same using a word set in this domain or in this project in particular than in other projects within the same domain, or for sure in very different domains. So it's very important to agree on a controlled vocabulary and use it consistently. So for instance, the names of the systems or the system elements or the names of the states and the signals that we use, avoiding pronouns to refer to the names and put them concretely. And one more important topic is the acronyms. We need to put a special focus on acronyms, because every single acronym that is used in the requirements need to be explicitly agreed and represented into the dictionary, so we cannot, so it doesn't lead to misunderstanding. And ambiguity. Sometimes can happen that expressions are difficult to understand by the different teams. So using adverbs such as it needs to be user-friendly, or the system shall run quickly. What does it mean? For you, quickly maybe is 100 kilometers per hour, but if we are talking about a plane, maybe it is also speed for landing. I'm not into that. Or if we are talking about surviving or managing, it is empty words. They are empty words, so they basically say nothing. So we need to avoid this kind of ambiguity. Solution-free requirements, this is also something that human beings, we tend to. When we express a necessity, the system should do that, we usually tend to put how the problem should be solved. So it is important to focus on the what and not on the how, because the requirements are not intended to give a solution. This is the work of the decomposition of the requirements and the proposition of the architectures and so on, not of the requirements themselves. Numbers, we might have problems with numbers when we are, for example, in cases such as the one that I was talking at the beginning. If we are defining physical constraints and we are using different measurement systems, such as the British imperial systems and the international system, and then we put figures in the requirements and we don't specify in which measurement unit they are represented, so we might get into trouble. So it is important to use proper measurement units for quantifying the entities, and in some cases, for sure, putting the tolerances needed. For instance, 80 Celsius degrees plus minus 5%. Consistency, for sure. Well, this rule of thumbs that we are reviewing, they all belong to the third C of the CCC approach for correctness. And this one talks about consistency a bit, and then we will also cover a couple of slides about completeness. But this webinar is intended as this is a getting started session of the fundamentals and of our tools. It is covering correctness. So for consistency and completeness, we have more webinars as well. So this presentation include a link to the other webinars that go a bit deeper into consistency and completeness stuff. So also keeping in mind in which level of abstraction we are dealing with. For instance, the rule that are applied to very high-level requirements, such as a business requirement document, maybe they are not fitting into other more technical specifications like system requirements or whatever. So we need to take care in which level we are. And for sure, very important, giving semantics to, or identifying semantics from sentences. So we need to define style of writing, so that if we are talking about the different typologies of requirements, safety requirements, performance requirements, functional requirements, or whatever, we need to have a set of grammars so that we can guide somehow the authors to write the requirements, and we can extract the semantics of the sentences and analyze them in proper ways. So for us, patterns, let me click here. Patterns or grammars or boilerplates, they receive different names. I'm sure you have heard about them in different names. So for us, a pattern represents a sequential restriction of elements that define the typology of the requirements. So they are, for sure, very different for every single domain. And when we are talking about requirements, for instance, we might have structures like this that represent when a condition happens to a subject, the three first boxes, then an action shall occur, the two next boxes, and finally we have a constraint, physical constraints that determine how the action is performed or in which cases. So patterns are really useful to reduce the false positives in correctness metrics. For instance, we were talking before about passive voice detections. Via patterns, we might know if we are in the precondition, for instance, when a condition happened, or if we are in the main clause of the sentence. And it also helps identifying coupled requirements, duplicated requirements, even though they are using very different words, but they are at the end of the day producing the same, let's say, model, same meta model. So we can identify different requirements using different words, but at the end they are saying the same. And for sure, we'll see in the demonstration, we can guide the authors writing requirements based on these grammars. We'll see. So for all this, we also have another webinar of how to create requirements pattern more in detail. So we've seen this 12 rule of thumbs. But for sure, I would say that the most important one is the common sense, the rules that apply to an organization might not fit in another organization because they don't have, no, they don't put resources on creating dictionaries or whatever, so they cannot apply the same stuff. So the most important thing of all of this is that it is fully customizable. We have an out-of-the-box configuration where we include the Incose guide stuff and stuff, and can be disabled, enabled. We can delete metrics, we can create metrics, and so on that we see on the demonstration. So just the last part of these slides. Not only correctness and consistency, we talked just a bit. Also completeness. If we check this drawing by the chaos report, we can see that the 13% of the projects that were not successful, 13% of the reasons can deal with incomplete requirements. So completeness is a very hot topic to deal with. We might be thinking, if all the different stages are covered in my requirements, if I create requirements for the user needs in the conceptualization phase, if I decompose properly during the development and production, then if the systems that we build, if they are validating the other side of the P, and so on. So we need to cover everything. And for sure, very important, when we are talking about complex systems that are composed of other systems, it is very relevant to take into account that even though a given system, a concrete system is okay, it might be not consistent with other systems. We need to complete this. If we are having, for instance, if we have defined state machines diagram, we need to make sure that all the transitions, for instance, of those state machines are covered in my requirements. If all the things that we need to take into account are described in the requirements. And it is also very common to happen that when we are specifying things, we put the proper path so that the system works. But we need to take into account that the failure cases must also be defined in order to create test cases for the system to check failures and so on. So if anyone wants to go deeper on completeness, examples, metric, how to customize, we also have a webinar, full webinar of this topic. So basically, what we propose to apply these fundamentals into automatic tools is a tool set called Systems Engineering Suite. Everything is in our website. I will show you in a couple of minutes. For today's practical session, we'll be using the RQA in yellow and the RAT and the green one. RQA deals with requirements with quality management, It allows creating quality metrics, customize, run assessment on requirement specification, see the quality assessment, create reports, and so on. And then the requirements authoring tool allows the requirements authors to create new requirements by getting all the quality information on real time, on the fly, as the user is typing. So when I start typing, I get quality feedback, quality metrics assessment on the fly. Then we have another tools. KM should be more relevant for today. Knowledge Manager is the tool aimed at managing the dictionaries and the glossaries, control vocabularies, creating patterns, thesaurus, and all this stuff that is used behind the scenes in the requirements quality assessment tools. For today, we are not going to be using Knowledge Manager, since we are using the default database that it is published in our website. It contains all these default items to run a first analysis and see what's going on in my requirements. And then we have also published Traceability Studio, which is aimed at identifying missing links between different work products, for instance, between requirements and test cases, some more. So let's go to the practical side. Okay, first of all, I will show you in our website, reusecompany.com, if you come here to the downloads menu item, we have older versions of the software in version 15, but the current stable one is the version 18. And just to announce you that we published the latest release 18.3 a month ago or so. So here you can find the different tools that we'll show you today, that I will show you today. The architecture to use these tools is a server client architecture. I have everything installed here in my machine. I already did the homework, so everything, I downloaded everything, and it is already installed. If you need to get, for sure we are willing to provide you with temporary licenses to use the tool. And here somehow we have documentation to everything. So if you want to know a bit more about how to install or deploy the tools, here you may find some information, or you can just reach us by email. But I just downloaded this RQA and RAT that I will be using today, right? Also, together with ontology database, if you come in, then it is basically a relational database. For this demo, I just downloaded the access file just to get rid of SQL Server or MySQL installations. So I go to File, and that's what I'm going to use. So I have here installed RQA. So the first screen that I get when I run this RQA is a connection to requirement source, which is basically empty. So for sure, I have some requirements already created. I have them in an Excel workbook. Now we have connectors to commercial tools, to doors, also doors in G, PTC integrity, rectify. We can also use Excel or recif, and then we have a proper schema based on XML files. So as I have the requirements in Excel, I just going to create a connection to this Excel file. So I have to give the path, which is a local folder, and then I have here the workbook. Let me just open it before, so that you can see that I have some columns here with the text of the requirements, with an identifier, and some more data, such as the author, creation date, and so on. So basically, I have some requirements near to 54 requirements. We just close, and I will show you that I cannot create this connection. First of all, because I didn't put a name, so I can just put a name here, system requirements, in an Excel workbook. So it is not possible to create the connection because this is not a rule of thumb, the Excel itself. I mean, if we are connecting to doors, for instance, in doors, we know that doors has objects and the object has attributes and requirement statement and so on. But in Excel, we only have columns. So we need to tell RQA what does the column mean. So we need to create some kind of column mapping, but I will guide you through it. Just 1 minute. It basically says that the code that we need is the column ID. By the way, this is automatically loaded, trying to look for the typical names of the columns. So it mapped everything. If we didn't have, for instance, a description column that it was called, I don't know, as you can imagine different things. The column has a different name. You can click here in the magnifier. You will have all the columns of the Excel worksheet, so that you can select the one that is the description of the requirement. So it will fit here. We'll just cancel. We just move on. Additional attributes that I won't be dealing with. We can decide. We store the quality. We are not storing anything about the requirements themselves in our database. We are only connected to the requirement source, getting the document, the text, analyzing and all that stuff, and we are saving the quality results in our database, pointing to the requirement A with the identifier and so on, quality, high quality, medium quality, whatever. So we can decide also if we want to store this quality in the Excel workbook so that we can later present some results or whatever. So I will just leave it checked. It's not relevant. And finally, it says OK for this worksheet. This is already configured. So now the icon is back to life, so we can just confirm the connection and open RQA. So it's saying me that we have metrics in the database already prepared to be used, but this document that we are just opening, it is not configured to run as an assessment. So we want to link the metrics that we have to assign the metrics to these requirements. So let me just put it bigger. This is the first screen of RQA once we entered. So at the first glance, we have the requirements that we saw on the document before. I'll come back here in a couple of minutes. But first of all, let's review the metrics that we have already created in the database. As I said before, this is the database that comes out of the box with the installation. Indeed, I downloaded it from the website. So we have one default set of metrics that are the ones that I told you before based on the INCOSE handbook. So if we check, we have 67 metrics. And one important thing is that they can be enabled or disabled so that they are taken or not into consideration when running the quality assessment. So by filtering, or just to see the enable metrics, we can see that we only have 29 out of those 67, if I don't remember badly. So we have rules here, metrics for identifying this rule of thumbs that we saw before, additional, passive voices, vague things, incorrect spelling, and some others. So I'm not going to check the metrics in detail. Let's just say that we have an out-of-the-box metric configuration, and then we have requirements, right? So what can we do basically is running first assessment to check what happens. Good. So it took a couple of seconds to analyze these 53 requirements, and then we can see that the column correctness gets results, not consistency here, because let me just go back to the metrics. We only have metrics for correctness in this out-of-the-box configuration. We don't have anything for completeness or consistency. We can create the metrics and customize them, but out of the box it is empty. So if I go back to the requirements, we can see that, for instance, this element has one only star out of 3 because it has some problems. If we see on this tooltip that it says in the summary that it is using vague adverbs, in this case quickly, and it is using a passive voice and should be designed. And for sure, this must be avoided if we want to get high quality, right? We can not only identify the problems, but we can edit the elements if we have permissions too. For instance, we might be connected to a doors repository, and it might happen that we don't have permissions to update objects. So in this case, in this Excel worksheet, hopefully, I can change the content of the Excels if nothing strange happens. So here, just by double-clicking a requirement or right-click and edit, as I did, we might have a bit more detail of the metrics that are complaining, that are put as a red flag, and by clicking on one of them, I can get the text highlighted here. Okay, also for the vague adverbs and for all the metrics that I have here. So I won't change the requirement itself at the moment. I will do it later. More interesting things that we can see is that, for instance, we have here empty line. The first element is an empty, it has no text. And I have another more here. It has a C in the ID, so we might think that it is kind of a chapter or a heading, separator or whatever. So can we avoid somehow these elements? Yes, for sure, we can. If we go to the configuration of the module that we are analyzing here, we have properties, right? And inside of all this information, we can use here this option that says that we can use condition to identify requirements. For instance, if we were connected to a doors repository, typically the doors object has a type column, so we can see that for every single object We can have requirements type, we can have chapter type, heading type, I don't know, many other things. So we could filter to just analyze only those elements that are requirements themselves, right? I don't have this in my Excel, but we can create an expression, for instance, to say that I want to analyze only those elements which has a description, which have a description. So I put a condition where the description is different, the operator different than an empty value, right? Just click on OK and come back, and you can see that now these two rows are grayed out. So we have 53 elements as well as before, but only 51 of them are, well, only most of them, but 2 are requirements, right? So now they are not taken into account for the overall quality of this worksheet. So another important view is this button up here. It is the same, basically, results, but from another perspective. Before we were seeing requirements one by one, and now we have the pie chart that describes the overall quality of the whole document. Basically, it says that we have high quality in the 62% of the requirements, and that the most common mistake or error, since it is ordered here, sorted by low quality, is that we have incorrect spelling. If we double-click, then we see that we are using MTBF in some requirements. It is put as incorrect spelling because these, which appears to be an acronym, is not inside, is not part of the dictionaries of the ontology. We'll see how to fix this in a couple of minutes. We then have some quantifiers here that should be avoided, and some other things so that we can identify which are the most common problems in my specification. And then we can change requirements, or since RQA is the tool intended not for requirements authors but for reviewers, we can for sure create reports, and check how the quality of the project evolves with as the time passes. So we can create quality snapshots to say, okay, at this moment of time, I create a snapshot to say, okay, let's track this project. So this is the initial point. And then 1 week later, as the project has evolved, let's see how it goes. So we will do some changes now, and then we see how it evolves. So just finally, with RQA, coming back to the requirements view, as I said, we can create reports, for instance, in PDF format, also in other formats. And so that we can say, I will just overwrite this one, so that we can present these results to the team or to the management or to whoever, and we can see a summary of how the project is going. We see overall information about the document, and then we have information metric by metric and requirement by requirement if we want a more detailed report. So let me just now close RQA, and I'm going to change my hat. I stopped being a requirements reviewer, and now I am a requirements author. So I have this other tool installed in my computer called the RAT, or the authoring tool. Basically, we see the same. This is the connection window to say, okay, where are you going to author requirements? I'm going to use the same Excel sheet. And the main screen is very similar as what we have in RQA, but we have different actions here in the top menu. So we can, for instance, edit requirements, remove, or create new ones. So if we go to the same that we checked before, number 8, the train should be designed to run quickly. We can just edit this requirement because for sure this has low quality, and we need to improve this. And let me just simplify the user interface. So you can see that we have the writing box here and the quality results on the right-hand side. So if I delete this, if you notice, the values changed, but I'm still having a red frame here. It's basically due to the default metric configuration that is saying that if I am not using imperative, then we have bad quality, and for sure the text length is also complaining. So we can start now typing the train shall, right? And you see that the right-hand side changes a bit. Since we use the shall, the metric for imperative disappeared, right? Shall reach a speed of 300 kilometers per hour instead of the train shall, I don't remember, go quickly or something like that, right? So we have changed the requirement and we got the green frame on the right. Currently, we don't have any single problem regarding requirements quality according to the default configuration of the metrics that we are using. So we can just click here on Save and Close. And now this row becomes yellow, not because of medium quality, but because of it is not saved yet into the Excel workbook. So all the work that we are going to do here is in memory, let's say, in a session, and then when we are done, we can save. We have the Save button up here. Right? So the changes are now persisted into the requirement source in Excel in this case. So we can check another one. If we scroll down a little bit, we have these ones that deal with acronyms. In this case, we have the VAC, which is being reported as bad stuff, right? So if we just double click, we have this incorrect spelling or supposed incorrect spelling, which is not properly identified. If we right click, we have this replacement like in Word, but we are sure that this VAC is one of the acronyms that must be present in our domain. So what we can do is, okay, we need to include this in the vocabularies, but we are just requirement authors. We are not managing vocabularies and all that stuff, so we cannot directly create terminology. But what we can do is, right-clicking, we can suggest adding this element into the domain. This is a communication pipeline between the different roles that are using the tool suite. And this is basically telling the domain expert that in this case, this requirement, and maybe some others, are reporting bad quality because the taxonomies or the dictionaries are not complete. So I will suggest that this element needs to be included, and then let's see how to deal with this. Also, meanwhile this is not included, it will be reported as not correct, and I can also say that this requirement should have a high quality. Since the only problem that it has control vocabulary. Since the only problem that it has is that one of the acronyms is not included in the vocabulary. So this way, very creative. This way, as a requirements author, I'm just telling the other roles of the system that this requirement shouldn't be medium quality, should be high, and we need to create this one, right? So I will just finish this, and then we'll go back to RQA, who deals with this kind of suggestions, and see what we can do with changing my hat again. And finally, in the authoring tool, we saw how to change or how to improve requirements based on the quality assessment, and we can also create new requirements. If I click on the new button, then I get the same window once again, and I can start typing my new requirement. But if you remember, we talked about requirements patterns some moments ago, and one of the very important things is that they help or they guide authors writing requirements of a given typology, right? So if you notice up here, we have different typologies, system requirements, system functionality, performance, safety, and some others that are included in the database out of the box. So for instance, for system physical requirements, we have an only pattern that if I put the mouse on it, we see in the syntax that it is formed by the physical characteristic in the second box in blue of a system, which is in pink or red. Then we have that shall be with a semantics of minimum, maximum, whatever. And then finally, we need a number or a measurement unit. So this way we can model requirements such as the capacity, which is the physical property, the capacity of whatever system should be, and then number plus measurement unit. The capacity of the fuel tank should be, I don't know, 40 gallons or liters or whatever, right? So if we select the pattern, you see that as soon as I start typing, I'm getting not only the red frame on the right, which means bad quality, but also I'm getting another frame of yellow in this case here, which means that I'm filling a pattern. I'm on the way to filling a grammar, a structure, a pattern, right? So if you remember the structure, after the article, we need the physical property. And then here we have a suggestion box, which is basically saying, okay, the physical characteristics that you have in your vocabularies are these ones. So we have here capacity that we were talking about, but I just want to model here another kind of requirement. So the length of and then we have system slot. So in this case, we only have two systems in the ontology. It has not been developed to include more systems. So the length of the component, for instance, and then we have the other side of the pattern, which is the compulsory action. So the length of the component shall, then we have the P, and finally the number plus the measurement unit. So for instance, 22, and then finally we have the different measurement units that we have in the dictionaries. So once I'm done with following this grammar, I see a green frame also on the left, which means I already fulfilled with the pattern that I selected of this typology for system physical requirements. So basically, I am done with the grammar and with the green quality, so it can happen, or I can think that this is a good requirement in this moment, so I can save and close. Finally, I can click on this floppy disk up here so that my changes are now properly saved into Excel. Right? So this is already done. We display RQA and RAT. And just to close the circle, let me just close RAT and open RQA again. I will change again my hat to become a requirements reviewer. So if I open RQA and I connect again to this requirement source, let's see what we have. For sure, we have the new requirement that we just created. And I have here, if I come to the configuration, I have one action pending here. It says somebody sent you something. And if I click on it, it says this requirement that has medium quality, somebody reported that this requirement should have a high quality because the problem that it has is an acronym that is not included in the vocabulary, right? So we can decide here if whether we must approve this suggestion or reject it. In this case, let me just approve. And if I come back to the requirements list, we can see that the requirement that we are talking about now, it has 3 stars in another color, just to differentiate that this is manual assessment, which is overriding the automatic quality because somebody decided it, right? And finally, remember that we created a snapshot of the quality before creating requirements and modifying requirements. So we can create another snapshot right now, which is status of the project after revision, first revision, right? And this way, we can check on the evolution scoreboard how it has evolved. So this is very short, of course, but if you see on the left side, the piece of green is a bit higher on the right side. It is 67% now of high quality requirements, and before it was 62. So we just improved a couple of requirements and created another one. So we improved the 5%. Meanwhile, the yellow, which is medium quality, and red, which is bad quality, should decrease with the pass of the time. So this way we can close the circle between the two different roles that are intended to use RQA and RAT to create requirements that get quality assessment on the fly, so that we can avoid or we can reduce the number of iterations between the requirements authors and the reviewers. And then for sure, from the reviewer point of view in RQA, being able to create reports to control how the quality evolves in scoreboard. And if we have permissions as well, we can change requirements from RQA. So this is all from my side. So let me just give the control back to Cecilia.
Okay, thank you very much, Borja. If you have any comments or questions, you can send them to the chat box to the reuse company. I will give you a couple of minutes to write down your questions, and meanwhile, I will tell you about our next webinar. It's called Ensuring Completeness, Consistency, and Correctness with the Master Patterns by Sophist and Right Authoring Tools. The company Sophist has created some patterns, and during the webinar, we will show you these Sophist patterns in our Right Authoring Tools with examples of real-time writing assistance enabled by the tool in order to check the compliance with the structure of selected pattern. The dates for this webinar will be February 26 and 27. Okay, we have some questions. In terms of performance, how fast can the analysis be done for big doors modules? And I would also like to know if it's possible to get the quality in an offline process.
Good question. Yeah. If you remember, in this Excel module that I was using, it was about 53 requirements, and it took a couple of seconds. So in our measures, it is about 0.1 second per requirement, and it for sure depends on the computation that the metrics need. So the more metrics that we have configured, the more computation power, let's say, needs the process. But in average, we are talking about 0.1 seconds per requirement. So if we have modules of, I don't know, 10,000 requirements, it's just a matter of calculating this average. And then the second question was related to if it's possible to get the quality in an online process, in an offline process. Yes, it is. In order to get the quality for these requirements, I clicked on a button inside of RQA so that it starts running, and then we wait until it finishes. So this is one way of working for sure. And then instead of doing this, we also have a batch process that can run in a server and then can be configured to be run every 2 days or every day or wherever. And it does all the work of computation. So it produces the results in our database, and then in RQA we only see the stars. We can see the results. So the answer is yes. We can configure this batch process to calculate the quality in servers or in distributed machines, and then RQA just to check the results.
Thank you. And if I want to create a pattern for a new metric, how can I do that?
Okay. Yeah, patterns. Well, we didn't see any metric as I would say as a white box. We treated them as a black box, but for sure the metrics can be based on patterns. For instance, for detecting passive voices. So in the out-of-the-box database, there are some patterns already created that can be used in metrics. But if you go to fine-tune the metrics and create new patterns, we need the other tool that we saw on the toolset description, which is Knowledge Manager, and the blue one in the drawing, KM, so that we can create new terms, we can put synonyms of terms, we can create patterns, we can define a product breakdown structure, and all this stuff is managed by Knowledge Manager, which is also available for download, by the way.
Okay, and how are the dictionaries stored?
Okay. Well, everything that it is inside in our database, it is stored in, well, technically speaking, it's a relational database with our own schema. So for us, it is not a formal ontology. It is a mix between an ontology and data shape, I would say. And we have our own representation schema or meta model. So everything inside of our tools is in our proper format. But we have mechanisms to import and export from, for instance, if you have ontologies in OWL or RDF, we can import and export RDF or OWL so that we have this kind of interoperability between other ontology formats. And we have also another mechanism, which is knowledge interfaces, which is basically if you have a product breakdown structure or a model in Rhapsody or in whatever tool, we can configure Knowledge Manager to connect on real time when it opens to these models in Rhapsody so that they, let's say, are consumed in real time by the tools, and we can have this product breakdown structure or this state machine model for the metrics. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't mean that it needs to be created in KM. It is just a connector from KM to the Rhapsody model to be used in real time. So we offer these three possibilities: content inside of us, connectors to consume models or whatever from outside, and import-export to Rhapsody. To RTF or OWL. Not sure if it answers.
Thank you. Is it possible to export the results from RQA to display metrics in another system?
Yeah, not sure. I'm not sure in which another system concretely you're talking about. We have mechanisms to export the reports to Word documents or to PDF, as we saw. I think also to Excel, to Excel worksheets. But if you are talking about another system, I'm not really sure. We have this export to PDFs and so on, and all the lists that we have on the tool can be just copy and paste into an Excel table or whatever, and this is our way to export the information. Then the snapshots, the quality snapshot, is also in our own format, so it cannot be seen in another tool. But yeah, I would say that the reports can be exported in PDF or just for reading.
Okay, thank you. Okay, another question. Are the tools able to connect to other requirement sources?
I will show you. I was using sorry, I will close this. I was using an Excel file where I have some requirements stored, but here we have native connectors to the most, I would say, use the most. I don't know how to explain it properly. To the most used, more to the top used tools in the market, such as Doors. Not only Doors Client 9496, but also Doors ND, PTC Integrity, Rectify. We have also a native format and RecIF. And we have a dynamic connector based on OSLC, which is allowing us to connect to any requirement source that we don't have any direct connector, but through this OSLC layer for interoperability, they expose the proper information for us to connect and to get and reach the requirements. So the answer is yes. We offer a bunch of connectors, and then we have this interoperability layer for connecting to other systems that we do not have implemented natively.
Okay, thank you. When first using the tools, are there any predefined rules, or do we need to create rules somehow before getting the assessment?
Yes, we've been talking about the default ontology. If I go to the website to download the tools, for sure, I need to download the database, this ontology. So if I come here, then we support, this is more technical. we support different relational database systems, but for this trial or demo, I was using the Microsoft Access, which is just a file. I don't need to set up a server, database, or whatever. And depending on the language, I was assessing requirements in English, so I need to use a database with some content in English out of the box. And it contains predefined rules. Indeed, the ones that we were using in this first assessment were included in the out-of-the-box. So if we just connect to have a quick look, here in the quality assurance, we have this metric set already predefined, which contains the 67 metrics that we saw. Within these 67, only 29 are enabled. So this way we can check the passive voices using vague, adjectives or adverbs, using open-ended expressions, incorrect spelling, things that deal with basic correctness analysis. So this is everything included in the out-of-the-box ontology, so we don't have to create anything. But of course, if we want to get more semantics out of my requirements, I will have to put some content information or knowledge into the system so that I can create parameterized metrics based on grammars, patterns, on the semantic clusters. We can create consistency and completeness metrics. As we saw before, it was empty because the default, the out-of-the-box ontology only contains the basic correctness assessment.
Okay. If our organization decides not to use certain metrics or to create new ones, is it possible to customize the tool?
Yeah, absolutely. We are talking about, we have a set of metrics, predefined metrics. Some of them are enabled and some others are not. So if we think, I don't know, if we think that within these 29 that come enable, I only want avoiding conditionals, I can just select the other ones. I select everything but the conditional mode metric, and I can right-click and disable. Right? It is just telling me that, okay, we're going to do this. Yeah, I want. Let me check what I did. I disabled all of them, sorry. But if I look for the conditional, yeah, here it is. I will enable selected. So this way, from the whole bunch of metrics, predefined metrics, I will be using this one. So RQA allows you to customize, to delete, to create, to enable, to disable, to modify the content, the rationales, or everything that it is inside and involved in the quality calculation can be customized. So that it is not, as we were saying in the slides, it is not commandments. It is a guidance and best practices to be applied depending on the projects that you have in your organization. Metric set that is good for user requirements maybe is not so good for system requirements, for instance. So we can do this kind of fine-tuning to get the best of our requirements.
Okay, thank you. When having requirements stored in an Excel file, what happens if two persons use RQA and write simultaneously on that file?
Very good question. Well, first of all, for several people to, for several people to work on the same file, it needs to be shared in a network location or somewhere. So that's fine. RQA and RAD support that. But if you are connected with RQA on that specification, and then another people is connected at the same time, and both people touch the same requirement, for sure the first one is going to save, so changes will be saved. And when the second one tries to save the changes, it will be a prompt, an alert saying, okay, this object in particular has been modified previously by a user. So what are you going to, what do you want to do? Do you want to, let's say, force your requirement, your copy, to override what your colleague did before, or you want to compare, or you want to ignore this. It is not a problem when creating new requirements, because objects are not in conflict, let's say. But when two users at the same time change the same requirement, then this kind of conflict comes. The same happens if you are connected to a doors repository. If you touch two objects, or I'm talking about doors or any kind of server-side application. If you touch the same object, there is a kind of logic that allows you what to do if more than one user has done the same. So, getting back to your question, there is no problem regarding connectivity, because the file doesn't remain open while RQA is running. It opens the file the first time to get the requirements, and then it closes. But touching the same object, modifying the same requirement, can produce this kind of conflicts that are solved then in the user interface.
Are the tools available for Unix platforms?
Yeah, thanks for this question. No, it is only available in Windows. All these applications are FAT client that run on Windows-based systems. But this is the current version of the tools, V18. And for next releases, I'm not sure if we'll get this in version 20, but we are working on thin clients to be used on web. So basically, the answer for today is no, but we are working on that to be used in from web platforms. But for sure, we are working on that, because all this computation and all that stuff is really difficult. We are adapting our architecture to work on these web-based systems.
Okay, so let's finish here. We are already out of time. Sorry for that. So thank you very much, Borja, for your presentation, and thank you to all the attendees. If you have any further questions or want to have more information, don't hesitate to contact us by email to contact@reusecompany.com or through our website, reusecompany.com. Thank you for your attention, and see you on our next webinars. Goodbye.